Om Aganati Miranda Syangana Gana Salaka Chaksurun Militam Yena Tajmai Sri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manovistam Snapitam Yena Bhutare Swayamrupakaramayam Darati Swaparantikam Vandeham Sri Guru Sihata Parakamalam Sri Gurun Vaishnavam Sya Sri Rupam Sagadatam Sahagana Raganatam Vitam Stam Sadevam Sadvaitam Suvarutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shivishikhan Vitam Sya Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pastaya Bhutade Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Tinamane Namaste Sarasati Devi Gauravani Pachari Nirvishesa Sunyavadi Praskata Desanani Narayanam Namaskritam Naram Cheva Narotamam Devam Sarasatim Vyasam Tito Jayo Dhyarya Nashta Prayashu Vadresu Nitya Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Utamashoki Bhaktir Bhavati Naistaki Nigama Kapadoro Garitam Param Shukamakaram Ritavisavitam Pivata Bhagavatamashamaliyam Mahora Hora Shikabuvi Babakaham Krishna Swadam Bhagate Dhammagam Nihesha Karunashta Dushamasha Paranako Dunodidaham Tamapia Dabashuta Vishwatam Vivo Samapirena Virambira Prakyahido Maranarum Sanklesha Nirvanam Nasanti Najata Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare Gorcharan Anjali Prashant Govinda Dev, thank you for joining us on this Transcendental Tuesday morning. Bill, shout out to Cathedral City. Good morning. Hare Krishna, everybody. Rupa Manjari, Hare Krishna, Prashant, Hare Krishna. Prashant supplied us with so many links yesterday. It was amazing. Every single verse I quoted. Good morning, Sundari Priya. Every single verse I quoted. Prashant, good morning, Jimmy, Taruni. We had a lot of visitors yesterday. I'm not sure if your friends were among them or if they're still yet to come on the weekend. If you have a ETA, give it to me so I'll make sure I'm here to greet them. We had a lot of devotees. I didn't meet them necessarily, but I saw several families walking around visiting the peacocks and the llamas with bead bags on their hands. And I wondered whether they were your friends or not, but I was busy packing a color order, so I didn't get a chance to ask them. In any case, coming to you from Spanish Fork, Utah, September 15th, 2020. And guess what? We're on the same verse for the fourth day. Just too much to say about it. I mean, you could spend a week on every single verse of the Srimad Bhagavatam. This isn't even a verse I'd probably quoted very often, but there's so much in every verse. In fact, just as the spiritual world is unlimited, has no boundaries, similarly every single verse of the Bhagavatam, you could speak on it a whole lifetime. Good morning, Mahaprabhu. Haribo. Hope you're well wherever you are. We'll always remember you whenever we see that beautiful drone video of the temple, one of the greatest promotional videos that's ever been made, and along with it, a wonderful promotional video of Holi, the Festival of Colors. Someday we might get back to doing festivals of colors, but in the meantime, we're trying to keep ourselves sharp by doing online Facebook shows and practicing our examples, stories, and rap songs for the Festival of Colors. Good morning, Sanjay. So once again, for the fourth time, the fourth verse, third chapter, first canto, Srimad Bhagavatam, Pasyanti Ada Rupam Adaba Chakshusha Sahasra Padaru Bhutananad Bhutam Sahasra Murda Shavanaksi Nasikam Sahasra Mula Ampara Kundala Loshat. Jai Ho. The devotees with their perfect eyes see the transcendental form of the Purusha who has thousands of legs, thighs, arms, and faces, all extraordinary. In that body there are thousands of heads, ears, eyes, and noses. They are decorated with thousands of helmets and glowing earrings and adorned with garlands. Just to recap, Devahuti told her son, who happened to also be her mentor and her guru, Tapasya Tam Tamasondasya Dusparasya Paragam Sakchaktur Jamanamate Labdam Metrada Nugraham. Good morning, Joe. Third canto, 25th chapter, 8th verse. She said, "You are my transcendental eye. You are my only region, my only means of getting out of this darkness of ignorance, and I have attained shelter of your lotus feet after many, 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 many births." So we were explaining that the spiritual master comes to us while we're standing in the darkest region of ignorance, and with the shining torchlight of knowledge opens our eyes. We also quoted Rishabh Dev, who said, Mahat Sevam Daughter Maharvimuktam, the portal for crossing over from this mortal existence over the Vaitarani River, which separates the world of birth and death from the kingdom of God. The key to crossing over is to get yourself a good boatman. You've already got a good boat. Out of all the 8,400,000 species of life, the human form is the suitable boat for crossing over the Vaitarani River. But you need a boatman. You can't do it yourself because the river is very difficult to cross. Devi Hashugunami Matam Maya Daratya. This material nature is very difficult to overcome, Krishna says. But those who have surrendered unto me can very easily cross over. And so how do we manifest our surrender? We approach the bona fide representative, the Mahat Seva. Mahat means great, but Seva means servant. So in spiritual life, those who are great are those who are the most humble, who are serving in the most humble mood. Example is given of a wonderful tree with lots of fruits. Those fruits weigh the branches down to the ground. Similarly, those who are great souls serve the Lord, and they serve humanity in general by opening up the door, throwing open the door to liberation. Mahat Sevam Daughter Maharvi Makdam. But one should, above and beyond all things, to make one's life successful, seek out, approach, inquire from, and serve the Mahat Sevas, those who are great by virtue of the service of the Supreme Personality of God. And if you do that, then the doors of liberation will be thrown open. The verse goes on to say, however, that Tamo Dwaram Yoshitam Sangyam, if instead you find yourself in the association of loose women and those who are after loose women and intoxicants and meat eating, then the opposite happens. Instead of the upper door thrown open, the lower door will be thrown open. You'll go down. I remember a joke. I actually told this one time at the governor's match at Diwali before I made my talks. Told about a man who was on his deathbed. He transformed all of his assets into gold coins, put them in a bag, and he asked his very submissive and humble wife to hang the bag in the attic so that when he left his body, he could pick up the bag on his way out. So he passed away. She did it. She hung the bag of gold coins in the attic, and he passed away. And then she went up to the basement, and the bag of gold coins was still there. And she said, "Gosh, I knew I should have hung it in the basement." So it's up to you. Your association is going to determine your future. So you're either going to associate with people who inspire you, who challenge you, who awaken, ignite your spirituality inside of you. In 2002, we had the Winter Olympics here in Salt Lake City. And the motto of the Winter Olympics was light the fire within. So that whole year, every time we passed around the flame from the arti and asked new visitors to touch the flame and then touch their hands to their fingers to their forehead, I would explain to them that that's what we're signifying here. Each one of us is an eternal spiritual being, part and parcel of God. We hanker after reconnecting with our eternal Father, Supreme Personality of Godhead. And so when we touch the flame and then touch our forehead, what we're doing is we're trying to call out the fire of spirituality, the flame of love of God, which is innate to each and every one of us. Ignite the fire within. So the spiritual master, the enlightened soul, the one who has seen the truth, is compared to a match. A match brings fire to wood. Just behind me, there's a wooden screen. And within wood, there's fire. But the fire doesn't spontaneously come out of the wood. Only when you bring fire externally in the form of a match or a tear and then touch it to the wood, what that does is it brings out the fire which is within the wood. So similarly, only by association of a realized soul, one who has seen God, a tattva darshana, in that association, the best qualities, the eternal spiritual entity who resides within the body is evoked. And when you approach a spiritual master and you have that good fortune, it is said that blind following and absurd inquiries are condemned. One should follow the spiritual master, so to speak, with eyes wide open. Not only eyes wide open, but eyes now illuminated by the transcendental knowledge which the spiritual master dispenses. And we all have doubts. That's the inevitable consequence of having spent many, many incarnations in this dark material world. You cannot associate with matter, darkness, ignorance, and not have it all rub off on you. And so we bring doubts to the lotus feet of the spiritual master. We place those doubts before him, and then we allow those doubts, the product of darkness and ignorance, to be dispelled by the light of transcendental knowledge. And as those doubts are removed, we're freed from the shackles of ignorance, the ropes of the three modes of material nature to act. After Krishna spoke the Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna and removed his doubts, the result was Nashtamosh mitir labda tatpashadamaya stito shmin gata sandeha karisha se vachanam tava. Just at the end of the Bhagavad Gita in the 18th chapter, Arjuna declares himself now free of doubts and prepared to act. So hopefully the sequence is that you find a spiritual master, you inquire from him submissively, and as a result of your submissive inquiry, the darkness is removed, the doubts are dissipated, and then you're free from the chains that are holding you back. You've broken the log jams that have kept you stuck in this material world, and you move forward acting in devotional service with a very, very crystal clear understanding of the difference between spirit and matter. Speaking of crystal clarity, in the 16th verse of the 5th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says to Arjuna, Jnanina tu tada jnanam yeshan masaram adityavas yatkaram prakas yanti yat param. This word prakash appears often, and it means the clear light of day. Prakash is the noon period when the sun is directly overhead and there are no shadows. There are no dark spots. When one is enlightened by that knowledge through which essence is destroyed, then that knowledge lights up everything as the sun lights up everything during the noon hour. And when you're standing in the sun of Krishna consciousness, not only Krishna is visible, but you're also visible. When you see the sun, it means you can also see yourself. When you see yourself, it means you can also see God, or it means you can see the sun. We don't make a distinction between God realization and self-realization. Self-realization means to see yourself as a spark of God, and God realization means to see him as a supreme, transcendental Lord, autocrat, proprietor, and permitter. You can't see one without seeing the other. Just like if you examine a little particle of gold, you'll find within that little particle of gold all the qualities that are contained in the gold mind itself. Similarly, as sparks from God, we possess the qualities of God: knowledge, bliss, and eternity, creativity, the capacity to love, incredible insightfulness, enthusiasm, determination, stamina. We're good looking in a spiritual sense. Everything that's in Krishna is in us, but in minute quantity. So to realize the nature of your own spiritual self is to realize at one and the same time the nature of God. The only difference is a quantitative one. Prabhupada gives the example that as sample gods, containing the qualities of God in minute quantity, we, as a result of our science and technology, can put a satellite in the sky. Now God, his satellite, are huge planets weighing millions and millions of tons. We do a little satellite and he does a planet. But you can see that the qualities are similar, that our plumes are borrowed, so to speak, from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And this is important. Only from the bona fide spiritual master who has seen the truth can you come to discern the difference between ourselves as an infinitesimal soul and the Lord as an infinite soul. Prabhupada says, even though one may be in full knowledge, and it's possible to arrive at this level of knowledge without a spiritual master, just by the exercise of your God-given intellect. So let's say you've stretched your God-given intellect as far as it can go. You've come to the conclusion that you're not this body. You're not man or woman or black or white or Christian or Hindu or Muslim or Jew. You're not 6 feet. You're not 5 feet. You're not blue-eyed. You're not gray-eyed. You're not green-eyed. That refers to the body, the outer covering. But you yourself are spirit, aham brahmasmi. It is possible to reach that level of realization without a spiritual master. But without a spiritual master, one still will be unable to discriminate between the jiva, the individual soul, and the super soul, the supreme soul. One can know one's relationship with God only in the association of a bona fide spiritual master, a representative of the Lord. Taibiri pranipranena pariprashnena sevaya upadeksanti te jnanam jnaninas tatmadarshanaham. How do we know who's a representative of the Lord? First and foremost, he never claims to be God, and he never allows his disciples to claim he was God. He's passed away now, but there was a very popular mystic yogi in India, and he never said he was God, but all of his followers claimed he was God, and he allowed them to do so. So whenever you challenge him, you know, do you say you're God? He said, no, I don't say I'm God. But he did not dissuade his followers pretty much across the board. Tens of thousands of followers, they all claim he's God. So not only does a bona fide guru not claim he's God, but he also, through his teachings, makes it crystal clear to his followers the difference between an individual living entity and the Supreme Personality of Godhead. For instance, if you claim to be God, then you have to be able to show your universal form. For instance, Krishna, as the guru of Arjuna, showed Arjuna the difference between himself and Arjuna as an ordinary mortal by, in the 11th chapter, showing his universal form, in which all the planets, upper, lower, and middle, were existing, in which time and its three phases, past, present, and future, in which death was bringing everyone down. And so Krishna was demonstrating to Arjuna that if someone claims to be God, or if someone allows others to describe him as God, then he should be able to show his universal form. Or lift Govardhan Hill. That we're going to talk about a little bit later this morning. It is important to note that because he represents God, because he never claims to be God, but he's always in a humble attitude of service, his greatness is shown through his humility. Mahat Seva. Because of that, you can be without scruples, without reservations, and without hesitation to worship that representative of God as if he was God himself. You can be confident that whatever you tender at the lotus feet of the bona fide representative of God will not be enjoyed by him personally, but it would be passed up or used in the service of the Lord. From that liberated, illuminated soul, we're going to see the spiritual world. We're going to see with eyes tinged with the love of knowledge. Prabhupada mentions that there are many things in this material world that we see through authorized books of knowledge. The other day, I mentioned that I haven't been to China. I haven't walked on the Great Wall of China. One of our participants, I think it was Joe, said that he had walked on the Great Wall of China, and that's great. Those that are fortunate who have been able to actually go there and walk and verify and see with their eyes and smell and taste the foods and so on and so forth. But those of us who have not been to China can still know about China, know about the wall, know its geographic location, know about its food, know about its people and their customs by having read authorized books of knowledge. So we see China, in fact, in a superior way, in an informed way, even better than we get information from our senses. The common example Prabhupada gives is that you can look at the sun with your naked eye, and the conclusions that you might draw by looking at the sun with your naked eye are that the sun might be 20 or 30 miles away, and it might be 150 miles across or something. And then when you read an authorized book of astronomy, you find that the sun is an altogether different entity. It's 93 million miles away. It's hundreds of times bigger than the Earth. So then only after having learned about the sun through authorized books of astronomy and astrology, then do you really see the sun. So the point is made here that if our seeing is enhanced and improved and made more accurate, even with respect to things in this material world, then how much more perfectly applicable is this principle in matters transcendental. To those who are not engaged in the service of the spiritual master, who are not engaged in devotional service, who are neophytes in the devotional line, God is formless. But to those who are advanced in serving the spiritual master and associating with he who has seen the truth, God has a transcendental form. Now, spirit is the basic field of creation, and matter is a byproduct of spirit. Most people in the world today, including materialistic science, think that spirit is created at a certain stage of material development. Heard one example in this connection. A pile of rice, white kernels of rice, sitting in a pile, which is often the case. Uncooked rice, sitting in a pile, having been picked and lying there. Sometimes if you're looking, meditating, gazing over some prolonged period of time at that pile of uncooked kernels of rice, you will see emerging from those rice little baby scorpions. Then you might conclude that scorpions are born from kernels of rice. That's what you see. That's what you experience. That's your empirical revelation. However, the scorpions are not born or are not produced from the kernels of rice. It is simply that the mother scorpion wants to camouflage the babies and not have them stand out and then become food for predators. So she lays her eggs in the piles of rice. Her eggs look very similar and are therefore camouflaged and hidden within the piles of rice. So when the scorpions emerge from the whitish kernel-like scorpion eggs, it seems like they're coming and being produced from the rice, but that is actually not a fact. Similarly, it may seem, based on the impressions of our senses, that spirit is a byproduct of matter, but that is not the case. For instance, a man and a woman conceive. At the time of conception, actually every time a man and woman get together for intercourse, there's not conception. Why is that? Because the same chemicals are there being transferred from the man's body to the woman's body, and yet we don't find that every time there's intercourse, there's conception. What is the difference? The difference is that the spirit is transferring itself into the womb of the mother, and then in combination with the material chemicals, Prabhupada explains that on the third day after intercourse, there's a little pea-like emulsion that forms and begins to grow throughout the 9 months of gestation until it sees the light of day. So the reason that there's that emulsion, that little pea-like formation, and the reason that it grows is because the spirit soul has entered into that. And if at any time during the pregnancy, the spirit soul exits that embryo, then there's a miscarriage, then the baby comes out stillborn. It is only due to the presence of the soul that the fetus or the embryo grows and develops to maturity within the 9 months of gestation within the womb. That same principle works on a cosmic scale as well. Mahavishnu lies down in a corner of the spiritual sky, and he exudes the universes, millions and millions of them, which are originally just like little golden eggs. Then Mahavishnu expands himself into Garbhodakshay Vishnu, enters as the soul of each and every universe. Then, due to the presence of Garbhodakshay Vishnu in each and every universe, those little tiny golden eggs begin to grow and to expand. Scientists attempt to explain the ongoing expansion of the universe as a result of a big bang, an explosion that hypothetically took place a long, long time ago. But the expansion of the universe is caused by the presence of the soul of the universe, Garbhodakshay Vishnu, within it, and it continues to wax and to grow as it goes along. So here in the 7th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, 4th, 5th, and 6th verse are basically the 3 elements of creation. Krishna is speaking to Arjuna, explaining the elements of material creation and the presence of spirit within. The first verse covers the 8 material elements, 5 gross and 5 subtle. Earth, air, fire, water, ether are the 5 gross elements. Mind, intelligence, and false ego are the 3 subtle elements. Okay, but that's not all. The materialists would have us just stop there and try to convince us that all the mysteries of creation are contained within these 8 elements. That some or other matter in those 8-fold forms becomes conscious of itself at some point of development and then springs up in all the 8,400,000 species of life. Not so. Not so. Never, ever has matter ever become conscious of itself. I have a microphone here that I'm using. That microphone did not spontaneously generate. It did not form itself. It is unconscious, it is dull, it is inert, it is made of earth, air, fire, and water. But in order to become a microphone, there was another actor. There was a designer, a creator, an engineer who was not created or produced from matter. It required the touch of spirit for matter to be transformed into a microphone, into an iPhone, into an iPad, all the different things that we have as a result of our technology and our creativity. They're all, we just take it for granted. They did not spontaneously manifest, but from dull, dead, inert matter, they were manipulated by the higher entity, which is spirit. So after having described the 8 material elements, 5 gross and 3 subtle, Krishna then goes on. Aparemitas tuanyam, above these, moving and manipulating and exploiting, if you will, these 8 elements. Aparemitas tuanyam, prakritam vidi me param, know it for certain, O Arjuna, jiva bhuta mahabaho yayam dayate jaga. There are innumerable spirit souls who are impregnated within earth, air, fire, and water, who spring up with bodies of earth, air, fire, and water, but whose existence and whose life and whose being is not explained just with reference to earth, air, fire, and water. It is a different category of energy called spirit. Now, this point you can arrive at without a spiritual master. You can understand that matter would not move, matter would not go from a lower form of organization to a higher form of organization in and of itself. That you can reach by the exercise of your God-given creative powers. But what Krishna says next to Arjuna, you only get from a spiritual master. In this sense, Krishna is acting as Arjuna's spiritual master, and he's unlocking the highest level of knowledge, which is to know the difference between the soul and the supersoul. Krishna says to Arjuna, Etad yonini bhutani sarvaniti uparare ham kritsnasya jagata prabhavas pralayas tata. All created beings have their source in these 2 natures. Everything that we see in this phenomenal world is a combination of matter and spirit. But then here's the next sentence. Of all that is material and all that is spiritual in this world, know for certain that I, standing in front of Arjuna, face to face, the personality of Godhead, I, Krishna says, am both the origin and the dissolution. Krishna is everything. Just like the sun, the sunshine, and heat are not different from each other. The sunshine and the heat are energies of the sun, and therefore are considered non-different from the sun. On a warm August day, you'll say, ooh, the sun feels so good. Well, it's not the sun that feels good. If you were on the sun planet, you would not feel good. Feeling good is the last thing you would say. But 93 billion miles away from the sun, experiencing the energies of the sun, which are in a sense non-different from the sun, you say the sun feels good. Similarly, the material energy, the energy of the infinitesimal, unlimited living beings who animate matter, those two energies, spirit and matter, external and internal, combine to create this phenomenal world. They are non-different from God. God is non-different from them in the sense that the energies are non-different from the energetic. And therefore, throughout the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, I am everything, because everything is his energy and therefore not different from him. He also says, practically in the same breath, I am also not everything, but I am separate and I have nothing to do with everything. So here's a verse for you, Prashant. 5th verse, 9th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. Yata kasha stito nitjam vayar sarvata go mahan tad sarvani bhutani machtaniti upadharya. Krishna further explains to Arjuna, as the mighty wind blowing everywhere. The wind is mighty. Right now, I think there's a big hurricane. I forget what they're calling it, but it's now coming into Florida. Mr. Willie gave us some pictures of the wind starting now to hit land in Florida. The wind is so powerful. The destructive effects of wind are mind-boggling. A couple of weeks ago, we had 115, 120 mile an hour winds in Salt Lake City, and big trees, 100, 150 years old, uprooted here and there, blocking the roads and crushing cars and coming down on houses. It was like a war zone. So wind is so powerful. It's described as the mighty wind, and it blows everywhere. You see, not only does the wind go at a high velocity and with hurricane force strength, but it travels fast, and they say faster than the wind. And yet that wind, which is so powerful and so destructive and can go from here to there practically at the speed of mind, it rests within the greater sky. So Krishna says this material nature, impregnated and permeated by the living beings, manifested and expressed in 8,400,000 species of life and millions of universes in the material world, as powerful as all of that is and as expansive as all of that is, it rests within the energy and the influence of Krishna. Prabhupada says the sky may be the biggest manifestation we conceive, and in that sky, the wind or air is the biggest manifestation in the cosmic world. It's possible to see, even though there's so much water and 90% of the earth is covered by water, still I think there's more sky than there is water, and therefore sky is the biggest manifestation that we can conceive, and yet the sky or the wind itself is within the overall bowl of space. The movements of the air, Prabhupada explains, influence everything. The movements of the air cause waves in the ocean. the movements of the air create energy. Right here in Spanish Fork on a ridge overlooking the town, there are big, big windmills which catch wind coming down through Spanish Fork Canyon and supply power to many of the houses in the area. So as gigantic as the wind is, it rests within the sky. The sky pervades and supports the wind. The wind would not be able to do what it does were it not able to work through the medium of the sky, and yet the sky is apart from and separate from the wind. Similarly, everything rests on the energies of Krishna. At the same time, Krishna is apart from it. Everything is maintained. Sun rises and sets. The seasons change because of the remote influence of Krishna. Prakash, 3rd canto, 17th chapter, 42nd verse of the Srimad Bhagavatam. I think this is also Kapil speaking to his mother, I believe. Madbayat batubatayam suryas tapati madbayat varsa tindu dahati agnur mitas charity madbayat. Krishna is Kapil is explaining to his mother, it is because of my supremacy that the wind blows out of fear of me. The sun shines out of fear of me. And the Lord of clouds, Indra, sends showers out of fear of me. Fire burns out of fear of me. And death goes about taking its toll out of fear of me. What does that tell us? The sun god, the moon god, the fire god, the air god, they're all working under the direction out of fear of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. Maya dakshana prakriti suyate sachara. Krishna says, under my direction, the natural laws are being conducted. Because Krishna is in the background, and only because Krishna is in the background, everything in this universe is being performed, as Prabhupada says, punctually and regularly. As powerful as the material nature is, it is working under the direction of Krishna. In Bengal, particularly every October, people worship the material nature personified by Durga, who has immense power. Shristi, Stiti, Palaya, Shadana, Shakta, Chayeva, Yasha, Burani, Burte, Ichana Rupampya, Govindamari Purusham, Tamahang, Bajami. Big, elaborate worship all over Bengal for Durga, the personification of the material energy. And yet, we should note that she is not working independently. Just like a woman cannot produce a child independently. Durga is material nature. That means she's somebody's nature. We should ask, whose nature is she? Because nature does not act independently. It's always somebody's nature. A woman always needs the male for impregnation. So material nature, as powerful as she is, does not act independently. Her power is within the power of Krishna. Now I remember when I was in college, we had to read The Prince, I think it's called The Prince by Machiavelli. So he talked about governing and ruling. And he talked about ruling through love and ruling through fear. He said love is always better. Love is always better. But whenever your dependence get out of hand, and that happens inevitably, even under the best of circumstances, familiarity breeds contempt. So servants often get swell-headed and think that the master needs them, they're indispensable for the execution of the master's will. Therefore, Machiavelli says, love is good, but fear also has to be there. You have to have a measure of fear. So similarly, the demigods are acting not independently, but there is that element of fear. There is that concern that if they don't perform their prescribed duties as delineated by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, they will get punished. And we saw that in the case of Indra. When Krishna was on the planet, Indra thought of himself as independent. He thought that he didn't have to represent Krishna, that Krishna could not, that the functions of rainfall and crops and rotation, all that, could not go on without his power. He was in the illusion of thinking that Krishna could not do without him, and therefore he challenged Krishna's authority by invoking great rainfall and trying to inundate the village of Vrindavan. And Krishna put Indra in his place. Krishna first, when the rainfalls came, it occurred to Krishna that he could curb this upstart Indra by destroying all the heavenly planets at the click of a finger. But then he thought of a much more instructive way to relieve Indra of his false pride. And so, countering the very clouds that Indra evokes at the destruction of the universe, Krishna took the little finger of his left hand and lifted Govardhan Hill, held as an umbrella of protection against all of that Indra had to throw against him, and under which all the inhabitants of Vrindavan sheltered, were warm and well cared for. For 1 whole week, Krishna held up the mountain on the little finger of his hand. He was showing Indra, that all of Indra's power could not match the power of Krishna in the little finger of his hand. Therefore, it is said, everybody, even the demigods, are acting out of fear. The terrible fear, even for the demigods, of birth and death cannot be forsaken by anyone other than those who take shelter of Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is the original source of creation. He is the power behind the demigods. He is the supreme soul of all souls. Therefore, the recommended process for intelligent living beings who have achieved the rare and human form of life is to worship the root, worship the source, worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Every other duty, every other responsibility is discharged when you water the root of the tree. You also provide nourishment to the flowers, fruits, and branches of the tree. Similarly, by worshiping Krishna, all the demigods, who are nothing more than the representatives, the arms of the body of the Lord, they're also pleased. By worshiping Krishna, all other responsibilities and duties are automatically discharged. And most importantly, by worshiping Krishna, the reservoir of all wealth, all beauty, all strength, all knowledge, all fame, and all humility, those latent jewel-like qualities which Krishna embedded within us as we emanated as divine sparks of him, those qualities manifest. Those jewel-like qualities of love and peace and joy and intimacy and creativity and power and stamina and determination, the ability to make your mark and change the world for the better, influence positively your family members, your co-workers, and those with whom you interact, and at the end of life, go back to home, back to Godhead. All those benefits and more are derived from just doing the one thing of worshiping the Supreme Personality of Godhead under the direction of a bona fide spiritual master. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Thank you for all your emojis. Please interact with us as much as possible. Join, share, comment. I'll look forward to reading your comments in just a few moments and responding to your comments and questions. Thanks for joining us, Yudha, Radhe Sham. Prashant, you offer an invaluable service by providing all those links. I advise those who are interested to deepen their knowledge of the philosophy and also to become communicators. Every one of us should become a preacher and a communicator. Check out those links that Prashant has supplied for you. Repeat them a few times over and over in your mind. Make a list or something. Go over your verses every day. They will become a part of you. Good morning, Herb, Dianeti, nice to see you. Terry, and again, Prashant. Kurt, Haribol, Kurt. Nice to see that you've joined us. Always great. You know, Kurt, I think there's going to be some people showing up this weekend, because originally we postponed the Festival of Colors to this weekend. So I'm getting a lot of emails and calls. Is it still on? Is it still on? So I was thinking of asking you guys to come on over and play for the people that are inevitably going to show up, you know. But anyway, I'm sure you have other plans. I'll just stand on stage and sing to them and do 1 or 2 countdowns. Lakshmi Nishinga, what verse is that in the 5th canto about the sun in the sky? Well, in the Bhagavad Gita, it was in the 7th verse, I think, 7th chapter, 5th verse. Just look at the references of Prashant. Prashant is very thorough. Rakeshji, thanks for joining us. Lakshmi again. Pran Govinda, Haribo Bill. So grateful for all of you. Rashangi, Yuda, thanks so much. I'll look forward to reading your comments. This has been Transcendental Tuesday, and after 4 45-minute sessions on this same verse, which began last Transcendental Tuesday, I think we're finally going to move on to the next verse in sequence tomorrow, which will be the 5th verse, 3rd chapter, 1st canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. So until then, don't forget to chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.